Hi, Ramini here. In this video presentation you will see how federal agents kidnapped the author of the book. They left no crime uncommitted, solely because he was a suspected terrorist. He was held incommunicado for 3 days and then tossed in a cell without heat or ventilation. You may be the next person to be tagged a terrorist. As proof, just days ago, Stacy Langton, a Virginia mother of 6 in Fairfax County, Virginia, reported that federal agents terrorized her at a school board meeting. The government agents were spotted in a Department of Homeland Security vehicle, in several unmarked cars, and in a helicopter that shined its spotlight down on the event. For days prior, Stacy and 45 other parents had protested outside the Department of Justice building that local schools were distributing inappropriate material to students. This made all 45 parents terrorist suspects. Is this what America has come to? Yes, it is. Watch this video and the next 33 for more proof.
Chapter 1. The Unlawful Arrest and Detention Scam. Loganville, Georgia. May 31, 1996. Snipers in a wooded area targeted 4 terrorist suspects leaving a house in a white Dodge van. They were ready for the kill. I was one of the suspects. Accompanying me was my nephew, my secretary, and her son. As I drove to the end of the winding driveway, a passing motorist flashed his headlights to signal a police roadblock on the west end of Claude Brewer Road. I turned east, avoiding my usual route for lunch at a nearby restaurant to avoid the hassle. We never made it. After traveling 1 mile, my secretary noticed a police car rapidly approaching with its blue lights flashing. I slowed, expecting it to pass me since I wasn't speeding. Instead, they pulled me over. 2 more Walton County police units then approached, along with an unmarked car to block me in. I was surrounded. The pretext for stopping me was the claim that someone was using a van to burglarize homes in the neighborhood. One of the police officers then asked for my driver's license and asked to whom the van was registered. As soon as I furnished the information, I was ordered out of the van, arrested and handcuffed. An arrest warrant from the adjacent county of Gwinnett was flashed in my face and I was patted down. The warrant falsely claimed that I had lied about my home address to a Gwinnett County policeman during an earlier pretextual stop on April 4. The warrant carried an impossible $20,000 cash-only bond. As I was led in handcuffs to the back of my van, an individual in civilian clothes emerged from the unmarked car and produced a federal search warrant for my home. He identified himself as Ted Robertson, an agent of the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigation Division. Unable to read the search warrant because I was handcuffed behind my back, Robertson quickly flipped through the pages. I noted only that the warrant authorized a search for evidence of mail fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Robertson then attempted to question me without giving a Miranda warning. "Who are you?" Robertson asked. "What's this all about?" I replied. "We're going to search your house, thoroughly." "I want a lawyer," I said. "Are there any booby traps in the house?" Robertson asked. "No," I replied, wondering what made him think I did and wishing I had. I was shoved in the back seat of a Walton County patrol car, where a Walton County police officer read my Miranda rights to me and asked if I understood them. Robertson's jaw dropped open in astonishment when I replied, "No, I don't understand them." This was the beginning of my resistance to their lawless conduct. I asked Robertson if I could observe the search of my home. "No, you're going to jail," he replied. Then I asked the Walton County cop why he was serving an arrest warrant issued by Gwinnett County, and why I was being taken to Walton County Jail instead of Gwinnett County. "Because of the Olympics," he claimed, "we've been given jurisdiction to serve arrest warrants from any county. You're going to be put in Walton County Jail until Gwinnett County can pick you up." That turned out to be another lie. A black man wearing a cheap suit plopped into the back seat of the patrol car with me. He proudly identified himself as an FBI agent and claimed he didn't know what this was all about. "I'm just tagging along to see who you are," he said. More lies. Until this day I'd never heard of anyone being arrested and jailed for the sole purpose of verifying who they are, except in the former Soviet Union and Red China. For the next 3 days I was repeatedly fingerprinted and photographed. I was even threatened with death if I did not submit. I refused to be fingerprinted, I protested. You have to submit. The Supreme Court has already ruled that you can't refuse, the FBI agent said. In the room was a Walton County sergeant who threatened me. We can even take fingerprints off a dead person, he said. I was instructed to wash my hands with soap and water before the fingerprinting began. While their backs were turned, I ran my fingers through my hair and forehead to apply oil. I also moved them slightly as my fingers were being rolled onto the fingerprint card. They never did get a reliable set of prints. Afterwards I was tossed in an isolation cell, the so-called drunk tank, to prevent me from speaking to anyone. I demanded access to a phone to call a lawyer. A Walton cop said, "We've been instructed by the U.S. Marshals to not let you call anyone." Meanwhile, my secretary and friends were frantically making phone calls to the U.S. Marshal's office and to jails in Gwinnett and Walton County to see where I was being held. They said they were ordered by the U.S. Marshals to provide no information on my whereabouts. The government's intent was to prevent anyone from paying the unlawful $20,000 cash bond or filing a habeas corpus on my behalf. The KGB operated the same way. They arrested citizens on mere rumor or fabricated charges and hid them in a secret location completely incommunicado from their family. Since 9/11, the government has passed laws that authorize similar arrests and indefinite detentions on mere suspicion. In short, the government has merely legalized the same crimes they've been secretly committing all along. During the 3 days of my unlawful detention, my home was completely ransacked to look for evidence of any crime. Personal items, souvenirs, photo albums, library books, and personal papers were examined and carted off. Everything of value was taken and many items were pocketed for personal use. I learned later that 25 police cars, including unmarked government cars, were stationed in my driveway. They made photographs and videotapes of themselves, perhaps in pursuit of a commendation for their bravery. The federal agencies involved included the IRS, ATF, FBI, and U.S. Marshals. But not the postal inspectors. They refused to participate in this terrorist abduction. The local law enforcement that backed up Robertson's raid included the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, GBI, a county SWAT team, the snipers, bomb squads to deal with exploding books, a county drug task force, and both Gwinnett and Walton police. And, for extra security from a helpless man in Walton County Jail, reinforcements were hastily recruited from the city police departments of Loganville and nearby Lawrenceville. They lied that I was being held at Walton County until Gwinnett County picked me up. I learned later that the Gwinnett County police had been roosting down the street before I had left home. They were perched to swoop in like vultures to share in the spoils of looting my home of valuables. It was later that I also discovered an arrest warrant had never even been issued or entered into the National Crime Information Center computers. I was arrested on lies and my home was ransacked on lies. During the 3 days of my secret detention I suffered from severe depression and ate nothing. Everything I'd worked for all my life was being stolen from me. The fasting, the worry, and the sleeplessness soon led to hallucinations. When I closed my eyes I could see a TV screen with moving images. I thought about killing myself, but I couldn't do it. I figured I'd botch the job and wind up a vegetable. Besides, I knew Walton County couldn't hold me forever and were required to take me before a judge within 72 hours of my arrest. They didn't because 2 agents from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms arrived to arrest me. This time it was for alleged firearms violations that were supposedly uncovered during the book search. After an ATF agent waved a still wet federal arrest warrant in my face, I was handcuffed behind my back and placed in the back seat of their Stolypin. That's the Russian word for a prisoner transport vehicle. Since the handcuffs were not locked, I couldn't lean back without tightening them further. It made for a most uncomfortable 2-hour trip to the United States District Court in Macon, Georgia. The worst part was being subjected to the deliberate mental torture of having to listen to their loud and repetitive playing of Bad Boys during the entire cruise. My deluded captors thought they were the good boys, being members of the same brave gang that initiated an unwarranted assault on a church in Waco, Texas, and the subsequent murder of 86 men, women, and children. I was dragged into federal court for a probable cause hearing where a judge was to determine if sufficient evidence existed to bind me over for trial. I soon found out that the evidence can consist of any lie a federal agent or prosecutor tells the judge. Invariably, it is accepted. Any complaints you have about such trivial matters as their perjury, an unlawful arrest, secret detention, unconstitutional searches, or even kidnapping under color of law, are not heard in this forum. Court rules demand expedients to enforce their alleged law and justice, and there are proper procedures and different forums for expressing your sniveling complaints. Their procedures come first, and they include pauperizing you and incarcerating you without bond so that you are incapable of defending yourself. Only then are you allowed to complain about the crimes committed against you. The hearing began when the presiding magistrate judge entered the courtroom as the bailiff announced his name, the Honorable Magistrate Judge Claude M. Hicks, Jr. Most conveniently, he was the same judge who signed the pretextual warrant authorizing a search of my home for anything and everything. Well, almost everything. Firearms weren't listed. When my case was called, the marshals nudged me to the podium. But by this time I was angry at the Soviet-style tactics used to kidnap me off the street. So when Judge Hicks asked me to state my name for the record, I refused. I replied, "I'm me. I am that I am." Hicks didn't appreciate the humor in my response, and I saw none in his. He ordered the U.S. Marshals to throw me back in Bibb County Jail until I decided to state my name. He figured a little therapy in the cooler might soften me up. It didn't. Thus, for the next 3 days I was stored in Bibb's drunk tank, a filthy 8x10 holding cell with 2 metal benches, a toilet, and a sink. My bed was a hard cold metal bench. I slept little since the cell was packed with noisy drunks. That night one of them began breakdancing on the floor. Actually, he was suffering from delirium tremens. I figured that out when he upchucked in the sink, which was our only source of drinking water. We were soon suffering from lack of water, but a humane jailer told us we'd have to get it out of the puke-filled sink. After 3 days of this punishment, the U.S. Marshals returned, noisily dragging their chains to frighten me. I was secured with handcuffs, ankle cuffs, and with a chain around my waist before they shoved me into their stolypin for carting me back to court. Hicks believed he had frightened me into submission, but I knew they had to hold a preliminary hearing within 72 hours, whether I stated my name or not. So I stood before Hicks, and once again he demanded my name. I refused and demanded a lawyer. He refused to provide one by falsely claiming he could not appoint one until I filled out a financial affidavit establishing my indigent status, a status he had created by authorizing the looting of my home. I pointed out that my assets were seized on the ruse that they were proceeds of mail fraud and that the government would certainly use any information I supplied against me. Therefore, I argued, a financial statement could be used against me and would violate my imaginary rights under the Fifth Amendment. Hicks pretended he hadn't heard of the Fifth Amendment or the Sixth Amendment right to counsel. However, firmly established Supreme Court case rulings gave him authority to appoint a lawyer without forcing me to fill out a financial affidavit. It falls under the Simmons Doctrine, a title given to a Supreme Court ruling where a defendant can't be forced to give up one right in order to exercise another. The only concern of Hicks in demanding a financial affidavit was to help the prosecution team locate any assets they hadn't already stolen and deprive me of funds to post bond. Nonetheless, the hearing had to be held since the 72-hour time limit expired that day. Otherwise they would have to release me, and that wasn't about to happen. So, though I still had not stated my name or filled out a financial affidavit, the hearing was called to order. The court's tape recorder was turned on, and Hicks suddenly remembered the Fifth Amendment. With the tape rolling, he now advised me that anything I said could be used against me. The hearing began with still more deceit and perjury. ATF agent John Paul testified that he had found 2 M60 machine guns in my house, and that by cycling the actions he had determined they were indeed fully automatic. And he swore they were not registered to me, whoever I was. These were later proven to be semi-automatic versions of the M60 machine gun. Only 41 were manufactured by Rock Island Armory for collectors, such as me. Furthermore, Agent Paul's testimony that he cycled the actions was false. A later ATF analysis report showed that one of them had a jam trigger and the action could not be cycled. Agent Paul also testified that I had an unregistered drum-fed shotgun called a USAS 12. But it turned out to have been made subject to registration after I purchased it from a licensed firearms dealer. It was not chargeable because I had no knowledge of its changed status. Other firearms were not lawfully required to be registered either, which will be discussed later, after this perjured testimony was given, but before it was shown that the firearms were not machine guns, Judge Hicks ordered the marshals to cart me back to Bibb County Jail. Probable cause now magically existed to bind me over for trial.